question about, is there evidence of the health risks of genetically engineered food? Has that...
It depends what you consider evidence. There's, is there any evidence that would stand up in a court of law? No. But then, again, if you don't look, you don't find.
And, you know, just simply, you know, commonsensically, if they're hiding it, if they spend billions of dollars to keep us from knowing the facts and the truth of it, I mean, that seems to clearly indicate that there's some problems there.
It's, well, what it is lack of follow-up. For example, there was work done by Dr. Carl Bernstein and colleagues. He's an occupational medicine person, and this work was done with money from, ironically, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and Health Canada, and they were looking at farm workers in Ohio, and he looked at exposure to foliar BTs. Those are the Bacillus thuringiensis sprays, and they did various, they looked at farmers that had adverse reactions, that had basically allergic reactions or had antibodies, and they tried to figure out what they were reacting to. And one of the extracts was a certain extract that basically just extracts the endotoxins, and it turns out it's the same endotoxins that are engineered into the corn and the cotton and all those. And 2 of the farm workers, the 125 farm workers, had antibodies. So that means there is literally human blood chemistry and reagents available that would be very easy to test the BT corn that's out there. Fine. You would actually have somebody that is allergic to that BT, so you can test the corn with those reagents and get an answer. And in fact, Bernstein finished this work 10 years ago, and he's never been able to get any funds to follow that up. Even though our original funding had come from the US EPA and Health Canada, people don't want to follow it up. There's work that's done over in Europe that finds sequence similarity between known human allergens and engineered proteins that are in foods. Those scientists want to follow up, but guess what? There's no money to do the follow-up. There's some suggestive evidence of actually a lot of ill people in 2 or 3 villages in India that their symptoms are completely consistent with allergy response, which is just what you would expect from these BT crops when they're being exposed to BT cotton, but again, trying to get follow-up. So there are all these anecdotal things that mice studies where they find differences in when they look into guts. Just last month, there was a paper published that reanalyzed it, got all the raw data, found 3 Monsanto crops, reanalyzed it, and found that there were subtle adverse effects on the livers and kidneys, and those are the organs that would be doing detoxification in the body, and they're calling for more research. But again, you have to have somebody to follow through, and you have to have the ability to get the stuff to do the research material. But because it's considered confidential business information, because these are patented things, guess what, scientists, if you want to study one of these crops, you can't go out and buy the seed and raise it and do your own. You have to go to the companies and you have to ask them. You have to say, here's the research I want to do, and only if they say yes will you be able to get that. That's why earlier this year, earlier last year, 26 scientists within land-grant universities that are entomologists, that people that work in ag departments that study these crops, they complained to the EPA. They said, we cannot do our jobs because we're forbidden from the companies. They determine what we can and can't do. You can't take a Monsanto engineered corn variety and you want to compare it to another corn variety that is owned by someone else. Sorry, can't do that. And so that's why even the scientists have complained. We can't answer the questions whether these things are safe or not because we're not allowed to do the research, and it's because since those are considered patented items, the companies control what kind of work gets done on them. So that's...
I just want to say one thing about universities. I happen to teach at one, and that they are, particularly the land-grant ones, the public ones, are more and more dependent upon private foundation funds and government funds. The science departments and the ag schools are all considered science departments, have the potential to get the big grants. Faculty frankly are forced to get grants. If they don't get grants, A, they're never going to get a job to begin with. They're almost all trained as graduate students and postdoc students in these big labs that are funded by corporations and the government and steering clear of these controversial issues. But they are invested in heavily by the universities because they're big grant getters. These young faculty members are big grant getters, and they can't stay, they can't get tenure unless they've shown that they're in an area of work that's going to yield big grant numbers. And so if they don't go along with this, they're out, basically. So it's a very locked system.
Well, ultimately what the problem is, and this gets traced back to, there's two laws, one passed in 1980, the Technology Transfer Act, that they call it the Bayh-Dole Act. And the reason that's important is up until that time, all public money that was spent, like at the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation, scientists couldn't profit from any of that. So that means if you find something that saved humanity or that, fine, then humanity is saved. Jonas Salk, the guy that developed the vaccine that cured polio, he didn't make a dime off of that, and he didn't think he should because he was working for the public in the public sector. And what happened is in 1980, the Federal Technology Transfer Act says, well, for public sector research, let's allow researchers to try to get this stuff out the door. They can now start to profit from the things that they work on. And so that means before that time, public research was really work done that was supposed to be in the public interest. Once you start to have an economic interest, then you're going to follow where you can make money. And that switched the headset of scientists, because that's followed through by Reagan in 1985 doing the Technology Transfer Act, and that mandated the setting up of these, they're called CRADAs, Cooperative Research and Development Agreements. So you come up with some new thing in the lab and then set up a biotech company, right, that is going to use that technology, and you set up that company and you open it up on Wall Street and you get $10 or $20 million in your initial stock offerings. So that means that now all this public sector research is being distorted by profit motive. Some of it's coming from large companies, but it can also be coming from the scientists, because if they discover something and they can make a huge sum of money on it, well, that's going to cloud their research. So there's a lot of folks that are talking about the need to basically get rid of this Bayh-Dole Act, and because of the way that it has distorted federal research, because the idea was as well, if we let the private sector, they can do things better, and it was thought that if we allow researchers to actually make profits, that will bring money into the universities, right? Through the patents, like margarine, which was set up in Wisconsin, that set up a whole foundation that brought in all this money to the universities. So all these universities thought that genetic engineering was going to be a big money-making option, and it turns out some places have made money, but the vast majority have actually lost money. So what's happened is public sector research has gone from something that was supposed to be in the public good to now sort of servicing the private sector, and that's not what the public sector research is supposed to be about.